morning, and thanks for joining me. I'm Donna Carrick of Carrick Publishing and the host of Dead to Rights, the podcast. I'm also blessed to be included with the Mesdames of Mayhem, and I'm here today with Lynn Murphy, one of our earliest members of the Mesdames of Mayhem. And we're going to talk about In the Spirit of 13, which is our fifth anthology, if you can believe that, coming out in the fall of 2022. And Lynn's got a couple of stories in that. I'm not going to talk forever. I'll let Lynn tell you about those stories. One is titled Gracie the Invisible Dog, and the other is titled The Trespassers. And they are both absolutely brilliant stories. But I want to start with Gracie. Lynn, can you tell us a little bit about Gracie? How did you come up with this dog character? You've got two characters, Paula and Boyd Sinclair, who are a married couple. And Paula has fallen in love with this dog, Gracie. Tell us about her.
Well, the idea came from my daughter, Margot, who is one of the bravest people I know, has an eye condition called retinitis pigmentosa. And what happens is the cells in the retina die off and you develop tunnel vision, and eventually you can go blind. Not always, but sometimes. So when Margot was diagnosed, she said the one good thing about having the condition was perhaps at some point she could get a helper dog. And that is looking on the bright side. And then she started creating this dog in her mind. She called her Gracie after Grace Kelly. And she says the dog is invisible. She is not imaginary. She is an invisible dog. She's there, we just can't see her. And then I got into the spirit of this thing and started seeing Gracie in my head. And eventually when this story idea about spirits came up, I thought an invisible dog is a spirit. So I will write a story about Gracie. And then it took off. Of course, it's not about Margot. It's about a woman named Paula and her overbearing husband, and who doesn't like dogs and has never let Paula have a dog in their married life, and how Paula creates Gracie to compensate. So that's Gracie the Invisible Dog.
One gets the feeling in reading about Boyd and Paula's relationship that Boyd would feel threatened that he would lose control over Paula if there was a dog standing between them.
Exactly. That is exactly what the premise of the story is. And Gracie, our Gracie, has become so real to us that we discuss her activities and so on now. And my family, my sisters have got into the swing of things, and some of our friends, and they send us presents with dogs on them and so on to reference our Gracie. So she has become a real character in our lives.
I fell in love with her. I fell in love with Gracie, absolutely, because we've had a female golden before, and she just speaks to me of Daisy. So now we've talked about that situation, but part of the theme that I pick up from the story is also independence in disability.
Exactly.
The whole ability versus disability conversation that people have started really having, and the need people feel to maintain their independence whatever way they can. Can you tell me how you drew on that? I think you've already started to, because it draws back on Margot, doesn't it?
Yes, and Margot is, luckily, her retinitis pigmentosa is progressing very slowly. They think it's a mutation. Often it's hereditary. It will descend in the family, but hers is just cropped up out of nowhere. And she is, she loves travel, that's one thing. And she is still traveling her own. She has a white identity cane. She doesn't need one of the guidance canes yet, but she has a white identity cane, so people will recognize that she can't see them coming, and from the sides. She can see straight ahead, but not people coming at her from the sides. And so she travels alone. She's not recently due to COVID, but she has taken numerous trips to Europe alone and just managed very well on her own. Of course, she has Gracie with her, so she has a companion.
Exactly.
But
That
you're
is
right, it is a story about people with disability as well as a story about an invisible dog and about how people want to have independence as long as they can manage it. They want to be independent. And that's what Paula says. She doesn't want Boyd taking over and driving her everywhere and so on.
Yes,
And
yes, she's a woman after my heart, definitely. I'm like, I feel that way. Like, just point me in the right direction and let me go on my own steam, because, I don't really want anybody fussing in my life. I don't want to become part of the, part of the manhandled generation,
well, as an older woman too, people look at me and they kind of think, oh, and call me dear and so on. And I hate that. Being called dear, but they mean it kindly, I know, and offer me to help me and so on. And so far, I don't need any help because I
That's right.
want my
That's right. I always
independence.
think I've been a little girl. I don't need to be a little girl again as I age. I really don't.
That's right.
As long as possible, let me not become a little girl again at people's whim. So I'm totally with you. Now, your other story is called The Trespassers, and it again touches on some subjects that are really near and dear to many people. Many people have had some exposure to these topics. Can you tell us a little bit about Janet Blaine and her grandson Sam? And the story opens with clues that you don't catch right away.
Well, the story also is rooted in real life. It started one day, or the idea came one day when we were up at the lake, at my grandson and he was about 5, and Margot was there too, and we were out for a walk around the lake, and there were 2 little girls standing on the lawn of a house, one of the houses by the lake, holding hands, and they were wearing pretty summer dresses. It was Sunday, so I think maybe their parents were taking them to church, and one of them waved to us, and Julian waved back. And after we got past, I said, that was creepy. And Julian said, it was like a horror story. And Margot said, it was like something out of Stephen King. And none of us had any idea why we felt that, why we got that wave of disquiet from these 2 pretty little girls. And that stewed in my head for a long time. And finally, I wrote the story. And it's not a crime, it's not a mystery. What it is it's a horror story, and the horror is dementia, and which is
reality,
encroaching.
yes.
And
the horror is another kind of disability and this one is linked
yes,
to aging.
Yes, I wonder why I've got both stories.
Well, I mean, these are really, really topical right at the moment, these themes. And I'm glad that you dove into them, and they touch on almost everyone's lives at one point or another. And dementia is not always Alzheimer's. It can come in many forms. My father, when he was suffering from cancer of the bladder, suffered dementia, even though his mind was in perfect order. But toxemia will induce dementia.
Yes. My mother had dementia, and hers was a different kind. She had high blood pressure for a long time, and she had a series of small strokes. And each time she had a stroke, it took away some of her memory. And she would come back from the stroke after a while, not physically impaired, but mentally impaired. And eventually she had a big stroke that took away her memory almost completely. So she didn't recognize her children or anything. But that was not Alzheimer's. That was something different. And it was something
again, yes, but it's still dementia, and we still bear the brunt of it in our society. For those who are not familiar with Lynn Murphy, please look up her book, Potluck and Other Stories. Lynn is a master of the light comedic touch for the most part. Now, these 2 stories in The Spirit of 13 are not light and only peripherally comedic. There is some light humor in them, but they are not light stories. neither of them, but she is known for her light comedic touch. So please look up her collection of short stories, which was published by Carrick Publishing recently, titled Potluck and Other Stories.
Oh, I should have it here to wave around, Dawn. I forgot to do that.
To wave around. You know what I'm going to do? I'll post the link to it in the undercarriage of the YouTube video so that all our listeners can go immediately and see this wonderful book of yours. Thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate it. Do you have anything to say to our listeners before we close off?
Well, I hope they're looking forward to the Spirit of 13, when are we looking for publication date this fall?
It'll be in the fall of 2022, yes.
Well, watch for that coming out. And also I have a story in the Crime Writers of Canada new anthology, Cold Canadian Crime, which is coming out shortly in May. So
you do indeed. So watch for that. Cold Canadian Crime, produced by the Crime Writers of Canada, and look for Lynn Murphy's story in that one. Thank you very much, Lynn. Have a terrific day.
You too, Donna. Thank you.
Dusty road, a man alone. His vital signs go on hold, and I don't know what you've been told, but the years have turned my eyes gold. And I told you what you told me, we'd never be in the same boat for free. Yet it rides